So you published this post yesterday on X talking about, hey, here's a couple companies that I think could acquire PayPal. And lo and behold, I think it was like less than an hour after you made that post, Bloomberg comes out with this report that Stripe is looking somewhat seriously at
Yeah.
PayPal. And A, I'm wondering what your reaction was. And B, let's talk about how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. Yeah. What I wrote in the post, the first company I called out was Stripe, but I actually said they have a lot of desirable assets for Stripe because Stripe has no real consumer brand and PayPal has a consumer brand. PayPal is there as a button. People know Venmo. And the most important thing is PayPal has bank account details for hundreds of millions of customers. So instead of when you pay with PayPal, um, you're often paying instead of paying with a credit card that costs them a couple percent, you're often paying with a bank account that costs them nearly nothing. And that's a huge advantage that Stripe could get. Now, the problem is PayPal has a lot of both cultural and technical debt. They have about 25,000 employees. They have, just a totally different culture than Stripe. It would be a very strange combination. So that's why I said it's probably a non-starter from Stripe, but apparently Stripe's looking at it.
What do you mean by culture differences? I mean, besides the size and the number of people that are there, I mean, is this, people, at the company, the ways that it's working, the way the company is built out?
Yeah,
Talk more
so
about
so
that.
Stripe is very much a developer first company, and they have been pretty efficient in their growth. PayPal has been around a long time, under the shackles of eBay, then out of eBay, a lot of different leadership changes, and it's just a fairly bloated organization, um, and not known for making decisions quickly or being super efficient.
So I'm wondering why you think PayPal would sort of fit better inside a larger company right now as opposed to standalone. I mean, we had David Marcus on the show a couple weeks ago. This is when PayPal announced the CEO switch up, and he sort of mentioned that PayPal had emphasized payment volume instead of product throughout the course of its history. Um, and I mean, I just wonder why you think that the company would be better inside a larger org, whether it's Stripe or you called out some other options too, like banks or credit card
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah. So okay. So I think look, PayPal's still a very profitable company. Um, you know, Margins are down, but it's still a profitable company. They don't need to sell. I do think that now with the stock being beaten down as much as it has been, down 85% over the last 4 years or so, I think it's an opportunity for somebody. So it's really a question of is now the time for someone else to strike? And yeah, we talked about Stripe. I think there's several other candidates here. The ones I highlighted were Apple again. I think a non-starter, but it could be a good complement to Apple Pay. Um, Apple Pay has done a really good job of getting us to use it at a checkout offline, but they have not done as good a job online. So I think that's a good opportunity. They never really got Apple Payments peer to peer going that well. Venmo could be a good fit there, and then PayPal actually has a sizable BNPL company, so BNPL division, so that also could be useful within Apple. Um, I think Apple has traditionally not done this kind of acquisition. I
M&A,
don't
right?
really see there.
What about the credit card companies?
Yeah, so Visa and Mastercard could both totally afford it. It's interesting because when PayPal started, it was seen as just as potentially getting rid of Visa and Mastercard over the long run because that with that PayPal checkout, you didn't need to use Visa and Mastercard. And then PayPal had a bunch of problems along the way. But that checkout button is super valuable real estate for their networks. And they've been trying to move beyond just interchange, which is like when you use the card, what they get. And they've tried to build relationships directly into merchants. So PayPal could be super valuable there. There, I would worry about antitrust. And I think it's valid, honestly. People in our world often hate antitrust, but actually, I think one of the two largest networks acquiring the largest independent online checkout provider would be, I think, a challenge.
Let me throw out two other options here. Amazon is somebody responded to your post suggesting Amazon. I actually wrote an entire Substack on this, and actually I was talking to folks in our newsroom, and they had this idea as well. I mean, Google has Google Pay, Apple has
Yeah.
Apple Pay, Amazon doesn't really have a native payments platform of its own. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Amazon is the most interesting one. It's the one I sort of like just left off, but I think it's actually pretty interesting. I think, and the main thing interesting there is um, the bank account information on file. Like that could immediately save Amazon itself a lot of money, and the BNPL book. I think with Amazon, the regulatory risk is tough, but I think it could be, if not for that, I think it could be a great combo.
Okay, and last, I'll just stop. I'll stop throwing out options here, but it's kind of fun to think about this. I mean, that's what you did
Yeah,
yesterday, so that's the game here.
super fun.
What about a block? Or yeah, yeah, I was gonna say square block.
Yeah, Block Square. I still call it Square too. I think look, Square and PayPal have so many natural synergies. You know, Square is effectively an offline provider of payments. PayPal is an online provider of payments. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want them together. PayPal has been trying for many years to get into the offline business. It's been over a decade. They tried really hard to compete with Square. They actually even had their own readers. And the idea was if you could just pay with your PayPal offline, that would strengthen the whole relationship that PayPal had. They could never get it off the ground. Now, the problem with Stripe, and the reason I didn't include it, is Stripe itself is trading way down. Or sorry,
The
Square,
block, yes.
Block itself is trading way down. And Block, I think, is trading at like a $30 billion market cap. So I think, you know, for them to acquire a company that's probably going to be acquired in the $50 billion range, I think is tough. But the combination naturally makes sense.
Well, and so on that note, let's go back to Stripe, the company that we at least have some reporting out there that is looking at PayPal. I mean, Stripe itself is it's a smaller company in terms of
Yeah.
revenue right now, and so how do you think they would pay for an asset like this? And then also, if it's not the whole company, which assets specifically do you think they would be interested in?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Stripe, you know, also yesterday there was news out that they were valued at 160 billion. So, you know, they don't have $50 billion just ready to do here, ready to acquire here. I think what ends up happening is you could have a consortium of private equity funds coming in and acquiring some of the assets concurrently with Stripe buying out the assets that they want. I think what they want is probably that consumer brand. So both at online checkout and the bank account information would be super valuable. And I think Venmo also would be super valuable to Stripe. So I think they could get those things and maybe pass off some of the other ancillary businesses to private equity at the same time taking a cash infusion into this business. I think, you know, I think it would be super value accretive to Stripe, and you could easily quantify that. And, you know, the Collisons seemingly have the ability to attract infinite capital. So I think they could do it. But, you know, to your point, it wouldn't be easy.
Well, and I was texting with someone earlier today, and we were talking about the relative valuations of the astronomical valuation Stripe is at, and then the very depressed valuation that PayPal is at. And so, to the extent that you think that Stripe is overvalued or just really riding a high right now, I mean, you have this free cash flow that PayPal has that would sort of help make the argument that, well, maybe Stripe is it's not overvalued at some point. Something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I think look, Stripe trades at a crazy high multiple, and PayPal trades at a crazy low multiple. So it's the classic like, you know, can you acquire this business and change the multiple from one to the other? I think it's gonna be really hard, which is why I initially counted them out. But you know, if anyone can do it, the Collisons can.
Great. Well, Sheil, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Sheil Minot, co-founder and GP at Better Tomorrow Ventures here on TITV.